Hey everyone, this is Ro with Ro's Wigglers. So excited to bring you another video, which is actually going to be my second video ever. Coming into this YouTube game, I've been keeping worms for 7 years, but I've just recently started up this business side of things, so there's been a lot of learning. And today, I kind of wanted to share with you a process to provide a visual for some of our more visual learners for what it looks like to start up your first worm bin after you get your worms shipped from me, how they come in the mail, and how you set up your first bin. So, to start, you want to have some kind of a container ready to go for your worms because I have learned the hard way that shipping the actual bin is astronomically expensive. So, you'll be getting from me everything you need except for the bin itself. So what I have here is just a basic bus tub. These are my favorite things to keep worms in. They're deep enough but still shallow enough to work in. They have a good amount of surface area here, which is kind of the horizontal. Rather than deep, you want the surface area this way. And I just really like them. They don't get too heavy to pick up and move around, but you can also totally use something like a Rubbermaid tote, or some people do even use buckets. I don't really prefer that, again, because I like more surface area, but you totally could do that as an option. But really what you want is a bin. Typically they're plastic, and you want it to not be see-through because worms do not like light. So anything that's going to allow light into the sides of the bin is less than ideal. If that's all you've got, it's fine. It's just less than ideal. So here's your bin. You've got this at home ready to go already. And what you get from me in the mail is, pretend you got this package in the mail. Here's your box. And you've already opened it up because tape is annoying. And so here's what it looks like when you open your box with your worms that you ordered from me. Inside here, you're going to have first this printout of instructions, which basically is going to go over everything that I'm about to show you visually, but if you learn better via text, this might be better for you. And then you'll also see in here this little sticker, which is instructions for what to do with your worm castings once they're ready, because a lot of people keep worms in order to get the worm castings for their gardens and their plants. And then here's another sticker, which is a simple guide, step to step, how to take care of your worm bin over time. So this is really helpful, a really easy, quick reference for a beginning vermicomposter. Then what you'll see inside the bin, it'll look like this. Wow, you just got a whole box of shredded cardboard and newspaper. Yay! No, this is actually serves multiple purposes. So through shipping, this is providing extra insulation to help protect your worms on their journey from me to you. But it also is going to give you a kickstart for some of your fresh bedding that you want for your bin. So I'm going to start pulling this out. Oh, and I'll also say that what I use, the shred that I use, is newspaper and cardboard that doesn't have any shiny coating on it. I don't use any computer paper or junk mail or anything like that. And my reasoning behind that is that that paper, the printer paper, is bleached. And also printers, when they print on your printer paper, most of them are using toner, which is full of microplastics, which I don't want in the soil that I'm growing my food in. Some people choose to do that. I don't. So this is just plain cardboard and newspaper. The newspaper ink is not a concern because it is made with a soy-based ink these days, so not really a big deal there. So I'm just taking, what I'm doing is I'm taking this shredded cardboard out of the box and I'm putting it into the bottom of my new worm bin here. So that's the first step. And then, oh, look at that, a magical surprise. These are your worm babies. So here is the bag that your worms will come in. This is a fabric bag, and that is intentional so that the worms will be able to breathe on their trip. We don't want to take away all their air. They're living creatures. They need to breathe. And so they'll come in this fabric bag just like this. So I'm just going to take this and set it to the side for a second. And then I'm going to dump the rest of this shredded cardboard into the bins. Boom. So let me see if I can angle this down now a little bit. Okay. Okay, so this is what it looks like now. A bunch of dry, fluffy, shredded paper in this bin. And so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some water. Let me get yeah, this will still work. So I have here a pump sprayer. You can totally just use a watering can for this, or if you have one of those like spray bottles, those are great too. I do this on a bigger scale, so this pump sprayer really comes in handy. And I'm just going to really moisten all this newspaper and cardboard down. This will take a little bit. We're going to moisten and mix and moisten and mix. And what we're doing here is we're going to try to get this bedding to become the moisture that is like a damp wrung out sponge. That's what we're going for. We don't want it to be totally soaked and saturated because we don't want our worms to drown, but worms do need moisture. This is one of the most critical parts of your worm bin, is making sure you get your moisture to the appropriate level. So I'm just spraying and mixing around. And you could start off with like a watering can or something to kind of make this part go a little faster. But I do find that this is a little easier to keep it from getting too wet initially and then having to dry it back out by adding extra bedding and stuff like that. So I'm going to mix this all around, doing my thing. And just for the sake of time, I'm not going to get this entirely to where it needs to be because that'll take a minute. But basically, damp like a wrung out sponge, you want to be able to squeeze your bedding and have it to where if any drips come out, it's only just like one or two. You don't want it to be pouring water out of there. So this is going to be, we're going to pretend this is totally moist the way that we want it to be. Then I'm going to just kind of like make a little bit of a hole in the center of my bin. And see this little hole here. And then we're almost ready to go. Like, this is kind of the easiest part of the process. And then we'll get our bag of worms and live bedding. So I really prefer to provide worms with living bedding, which means this is the bedding that they were already in their previous worm bin. You're going to get worms of all ages and probably some cocoons in here. And since this bedding is what they've already been in, it's already full of all of the biology, the microbes, the bacteria and fungi that the worms need to be able to support the food breakdown process in their bin. This bin right now, without this just the shredded cardboard, is a pretty sterile environment, and that can really stress your worms out to make that transfer. And that's how a lot of people, when they get their worms and they get instructions for a new worm bin, it says start with this shredded paper and add your worms, and eventually things will balance out again, but this makes for a much smoother transition. So live bedding is what I provide with my worms in this little bag, and you're about to see it here. So see inside here. So when I take this, the idea is I'm going to take this and I'm going to dump it right into the center of my little hole here. Okay, you can see some worms. Let me get a handful so you can see an up-close visual. So, move this over. So you see all these little wormies living their best life. They're hiding quickly because they don't like the light, like I said. Oh, here's a big one. They're very happy. So all I did was I dumped them right into the center of this bin. I'm not going to even bury them with the new bedding or anything like that. Let me switch this back up a little bit again. Okay, so, whoop, sorry. So all I'm doing now at this point Still trying to figure out a good system for holding my camera. But the last thing I'm going to do before I tuck my little wormies in is I'm going to give them a misting too, because they might be a little bit thirsty from their travels. And again, we're not saturating it. I'm just giving them a little misting right on top to help them acclimate and kind of de-stress. Your worms, when you get them in the mail, they might look a little bit lethargic, kind of skinny, not moving too much. And that's just from the stress of their journey. They'll bounce back within a week or two, and then you'll see them just live their best life, nice and wiggly like you want, and they'll be ready to really chomp down on some of your fruit and veggie scraps. So, the last thing then that you want to do to set up your worm bin is you take what I lovingly like to call a worm blanket, and it's just really a piece of plastic. I find this to be the best thing to cover my bin. I don't use a lid. There's no need. Worms don't try to escape when they're in the perfect happy environment. They just need a piece of plastic over the top. It can be, you know, a piece of your Amazon packaging. It can be a cut up piece of black trash bag, a food bag from if you have cats or something. Any of those things are great. And it just sits right on the top of your bin like this. And then that's really it. The last step that I do like to recommend is now, because you have these stickers from me, and this is how I sell these worm bins locally, the ready to go worm bins, is I like to take this sticker and just stick it right on to my little worm blanket like this. That way I have that reminder right in place. It's not lost. I don't know about you, but if you put something somewhere and you can't find it again. And this really is just like that helpful guide again to remind you what to do, how to take care of your worms. It tells you what you can feed them, what not to feed them, sort of how often, what you want your moisture level to be. And then I take my other little worm casting sticker and I put it just on the front of the bin. That way I always have that little reminder there too. And what I like to do is not feed them right away. Let them get kind of settled in and then wait for about a week. They'll have plenty of food left over in their live bedding, and they'll also start to eat the new bedding that you give. So they're not going to starve. Worms actually really somewhat thrive on neglect. So don't worry, they'll be fine. And then in about a week, go ahead and feed them your first feeding. And I like to recommend you start with about 1 cup worth of food. And that can be fruit and veggie scraps, coffee grounds, and all of that is listed on your sticker as well. Start with about 1 cup of food, find a little pocket somewhere in your bin, make a little hole, stick it in there, you know, and point this down a little bit. So I would just make a little hole right here, stick my little cup of food in there. I highly recommend freezing your fruit and veggie scraps first. That way you can really avoid any fruit flies. And then just cover it back up with your bedding. And what you'll do is when it's time to feed again, you'll check your bin about a week later. If the food is totally gone, it's time to feed again. If the food is not gone yet, that means you want to wait just a little bit longer. That's one of the number one things. A lot of people, one of the biggest mistakes people make is that they overfeed their bins. So again, worms thrive on neglect. Don't worry, they're not starving. They will also eat their bedding, so you don't have to really worry too much about that. And that's it. Then you just want to store your bin somewhere that is somewhere between 45 and 85 degrees. They really thrive at around 73 degrees, but between 45 and 85, they'll stay alive and do just fine. All right, well, this is Ro with Rose Wigglers. Thank you again. Please like and subscribe. I'm still kind of getting out there, and I would love to hear any comments, any questions you have, any other vermicomposters. If you have recommendations or additional information, please do leave that in the comments too. I tell people I'm a farmer, and I tell people there are as many ways to farm as there are farmers. And I think to some degree that can also be true for worms. It's all about your setup and your context. So yeah, like and subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you at the next video.